liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom.
You're tapped in, so let's get to it. So since this war with the United States and Israel against Iran started back in February 28th to be exact, 2026, American allies, those especially in the West, NATO allied countries and the EU, have spoken out against this war. And for the most part, they've all said that this war was totally unnecessary. That's one. Two, you didn't notify us. You didn't say, hey, that, this is what you were going to do. We were in the blind in terms of what you wanted to do in, initiating this war. United States, though, as arrogant as Donald Trump is and his administration, they thought or saw fit that it wasn't necessary to notify NATO allies about what was going to take place. However, they did expect that, or for these NATO allies to support them by way of using their airspace as well as their air bases, being able to refuel and resupply, things of that nature. A lot of NATO allies, though, however, had something else in mind. And they said, well, since this is something you, Donald Trump, the United States government, your administration wanted to do without notifying us, have at it, but don't involve us. In fact, we will not be involved in any shape, form, or fashion. That being said, again, a lot of NATO nations have stepped up and stepped out. They've spoken up and spoken out. Spain is one of the most vocal in terms of these NATO or the NATO allies or allies to the United States who are in the NATO organization. Spain has been an advocate for peace and also saying just outright, this should have never occurred. In fact, it's an illegal war. Now, that has angered Donald Trump and his administration, no doubt, as most of us know. The things are the relationship between not just Spain, but there's also Italy, the UK, Germany. That relationship is souring as we see daily. It doesn't seem as though anytime soon that the relationship between those countries, those NATO countries in the United States, will mend anytime soon. Let's put it like that. Spain, though, is one of those countries that has said, you know what? Yeah, we don't want to tolerate any of this. And Donald Trump's an idiot, and they put it mildly, to say the least. But yes, Spain, well, the U.S. government has expressed significant frustrations with Spain's opposition to the ongoing military conflict or war with Iran, which began, again, like I said, February 28, 2026. Those tensions, though, escalated after Spain's Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, formally refused to allow the U.S. to use jointly operated military bases at Rota and Moran for offensive operations against Iran. Spain has since doubled down by closing its airspace to the U.S. So that's a twofer. Not only can you cannot use our bases, but you can no longer use our airspace as well. Your aircraft cannot fly over, our country for, especially in terms or in regards to this war you got going on with Iran. So any U.S. aircraft involved in those strikes would sight or trying to fly over Spain, to go and attack Iran would be viewed as violations, of international law and Spain's sovereignty. Well, that being said, Trump said, okay, I got something for you guys. And this is Trump's behavior. Everyone should know this by now. Trump is a very conceited individual. It's either Trump's way or the highway. So Trump, in return or in retaliation, began to throw out their trade threats. He began to imply that there will be trade, sanctions, things of that nature, even tariffs, applied to Spain and its president. Donald Trump has publicly labeled Spain a terrible ally and threatened to sever all trade ties with the country and potentially the EU. So again, it's just not NATO that are the NATO allies to the US who have a problem with this war with Iran. It is also the EU, the European nations, or the European Union. NATO's status in terms of this conflict or this war that United States started, the internal Pentagon emails leaked in April 2026 suggest that the U.S. has considered extreme measures, including the potential suspension of Spain from NATO. I wonder how they'll pull that off. Well, anyway, the Spanish position, the Prime Minister Sanchez has emerged as a leading critic of the war, stating, and I quote, "Not to resolve conflicts with bombs, no to war," end quote. Spain has also withdrawn its ambassador from Israel in protest to the joint U.S.-Israel or Israeli campaign. Now, to say the least, that's what Spain did in terms of Israel's involvement to remove their ambassador. But other European states have followed suit. Israel is also feeling the pinch, as for or because of this war that they started with the United States against Iran. Other NATO nations as well as EU members are saying, you know what, we don't like what you're doing, and they're calling in ambassadors and they're checking them and letting them know, to let Netanyahu know, we're against all this crap. There's no reason, this should be happening. And in fact, we understand what's been going on for a long time, and we're no longer going to have, anything to do with this. They went so far, EU members, as well as NATO allies, they went as far as to shut down Israel's Mossad operations in their countries. They've rounded up numerous Mossad spies in these countries, detained them, and it's in fact, end up sending a lot of them back to Israel. They've dismantled some of the apparatuses and organizations, the spy cells in their countries. They've gotten rid of them. So this thing has a broad effect, not just on the United States, but Israel as well. So those two nations who are involved in this illegal and unjust war are starting to feel the pinch from NATO allies as well as EU members. It goes further than that. There's a lot of diplomatic contradictions. Like in early March, for instance, the White House claimed Spain had agreed to cooperate, an assertion that the Spanish government swiftly and categorically rejected. So as of May 8th, 2026, despite a shaky ceasefire established in early April, the U.S. continues to pressure Spain as it maintains a naval blockade of Iranian ports and executes Project Freedom to force commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. But we all know that this Project Freedom thing is put on hold or was paused for a number of reasons, a lot of which we won't really get the truth of, or truth as to why that happened, other than the fact that some Eastern Arab countries didn't like the fact that they were doing that and had not notified them. However, they said, we're going to use your air base though for these these strikes or whatever we want to do with this new Project Freedom. Those Arab nations were totally against that as well. So that's why that was put on hold, and it's put on hold, we think, here at TAP, only to find different routes in terms of executing this plan of Project Freedom. So if certain Arab nations won't allow their bases to be used as well as their airspace, then the United States is working on an alternative route. That's what we think here at TAP. But that being said, yes, Spain has stepped out, spoken up, and is speaking out in regards to this, what they call, Spain, an illegal war. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on, and to give us greater context and help me to explain or express this point, I have a clip. I'm going to drop this clip. Before we do, as always, please like, share, follow, comment, and subscribe to TAP, the Art of Political Discourse. Again, we can't say it enough. You guys' participation and viewership with this channel, it means a great deal to us. So yes, please hit that like and share button as well as subscribe. We would appreciate that greatly. That being said, let's get to this clip, because again, I don't know. I tend to think that the more that Donald Trump does, the more arrogant he becomes, the less other nations will support him, or not even him, but the country and its so-called interest, in the broader world. This is what we see occurring. So, it's as though these countries, those in the EU as well as NATO, are saying, "Hey, just give him enough rope. He wants to be a cowboy, he'll hang himself," and that's what they're doing. That's exactly what they're doing. That being said, let's bring this clip in here. All right. And this is courtesy of Times of India. Okay.
A new diplomatic firestorm has erupted across Europe as Spain summoned Israel's top envoy in Madrid over what it condemned as the unacceptable and intolerable detention of a Spanish activist aboard a humanitarian flotilla bound for Gaza. The confrontation marks another dramatic collapse in already deteriorating Spain-Israel relations, with Madrid accusing Israeli authorities of crossing international red lines and defying repeated demands for the activist's immediate release.
And that seems to be Spain's stance, that a lot of what is going on, not just with the United States going to war with Iran, with Israel, but Israel's behavior before the war started. And this is the thing I think a lot of these EU members as well as NATO allies are saying, like, hey, we've watched this go on long enough, the genocide of Palestinians, the total destruction of Palestine. For what? For what? For 3 years. For what? Now they're seeing this escalation of this aggression escalate over into Lebanon. And now Lebanese or civilians are suffering or dying as a result of Israel's bloodlust or thirst to kill as many people as they possibly can. That's the only way to describe that. So, yeah, these countries are stepping up and saying, hey, this is not Israel. What you guys are doing cannot be representative of a nation that, has been through supposedly the worst Holocaust, let you guys tell it, in world history. They're not feeling any of this. They're not feeling not one bit of this. And they're threatening. I read just recently that if Netanyahu is to visit any of these, these European countries, well, those who are saying this out loud, he will be arrested for war crimes and then, delivered or, sent to The Hague to stand trial. So Benjamin Netanyahu, the only places he may be able to go is the United States, one, maybe Argentina and a few others. But for those countries that are a part of the ICC, they've come out and said, hey, Netanyahu, if you come here, we're going to arrest you. And they're also going out of their way to let him know, we don't support you. We don't support anything that you are doing or have been doing for a very long time, which is good. It's about time that the international world speak up about the atrocities that the occupying Israeli regime have been enacting or committing against people in the Middle East. And not only that, but the wars that have been started that took place in the Middle East was and is because of Israel.
What began as a maritime interception is now spiraling into a full-scale diplomatic clash, one threatening to deepen Europe's growing divide over the Gaza conflict.
Our position is clear regarding the illegal detention of Saif Abu Kesek and his transfer to Israel. We are demanding the immediate release of these individuals, and we have clearly conveyed this position to the relevant Israeli authorities. I have personally communicated this to my direct counterpart, the Israeli Minister of Foreign Affairs. This action is entirely contrary to international law, as it followed a forced boarding in international waters. They must be released without any further delay. International law, including humanitarian law and the law of the sea, which are being violated, must be respected by all, including Israel.
And see, I think that's where the problem where a lot of these countries, the problem is a lot of these countries it seems as though they don't recognize the fact that Israel does not follow or abide by international laws. Israel only functions and abide by it. It exists only to serve its laws. International laws, things of that nature, does not matter. Sovereignty does not matter to Israel. And this is a mistake a lot of these European or NATO members and allies make when they address Israel, is as though they don't see that Israel has no concern with international law, period, or anything that, let's say, for instance, the United Nations has established and other countries agreed upon in terms of international law. Another thing that Israel does not recognize or respect in terms of international law is the IEAE. Israel do have nuclear weapons, but they do not succumb or subscribe to the rules and regulations to maintain, house those nuclear weapons. They answer to no one. And so, yeah, again, the mistake with a lot of these European nations is that they don't call a duck when they should. They should have been holding Israeli feet to the fire, calling them on all these abuses and violations of international law. That's where part of the problem is. And because you waited so long to do this, Israel's in the mindset that, hey, man, we're not going to listen to none of this because we've been doing this and you guys been knowing it. And all of a sudden you want to change the game, So that's their problem. That is their problem.
It is unacceptable for vessels to be boarded in international waters, for their crews to be detained, and for the vessels to be disabled without regard for the most basic international standards.
Speaking before Parliament, Foreign Minister Jose Manuel Alvarez confirmed that Israel's charge d'affaires was summoned for a second time this week after an Israeli court extended the detention of Saif Abu Kashek until Sunday. Abu Kashek, a Spanish national of Palestinian origin, had been aboard the global Samud flotilla when Israeli forces intercepted it in international waters near Greece. Alongside him, Brazilian activist Tiago Avila also remains in custody. No formal charges have been filed against either man, even as rights groups allege mistreatment in detention, claims Israeli authorities strongly deny.
So you mean to tell me that Israel went into international waters near the sovereign nation of Greece and abducted people? If that's not bold or a total disregard of international law, especially maritime law, I don't know what is. Wow.
The incident has added fuel to an already tense relationship between the two countries, which has steadily deteriorated since the outbreak of the Gaza war in October 2023. The flotilla itself was part of a renewed effort by activists to challenge Israel's blockade on Gaza, where shortages of essential supplies have drawn mounting international concern. While most participants were expelled back to Europe, Abu Kashek and Avila were detained, triggering diplomatic outrage in Madrid. The row deepened further when Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez honored UN rapporteur Francesca Albanese with Spain's Order of Civil Merit for her documentation of alleged violations in Gaza. Albanese's stance has angered Israel and prompted sanctions from the United States, which accuses her of bias. Sanchez has since urged the European Commission to shield her from the impact of those measures. Diplomatic ties between Spain and Israel were already frayed after Spain recognized a Palestinian state in 2024 and later withdrew its ambassador. With the latest detention dispute and public honors for one of Israel's harshest critics, relations appear to be entering their most volatile phase yet.
Now, here's the trouble with this for me. You have all these people, and I'm not absolutely sure where they're marching. Um, okay, Barcelona, Spain, and they seem to be. Oh, those could very well be Jewish shops that they're attacking and destroying. I see a swastika drawn on the glass there. So yeah, you have this type of uprising or support, for a people who are being oppressed or who have to deal with and suffer apartheid, not only that, but genocide from Israel. Yeah, their government then is very mindful of what the people are thinking and feeling. That's type of support you want from your government, to do as the people ask or do as they do. That's one of the things I think that makes a good government, or who are in the support. A good government is the one that's in support of the people. Mhm.
Fortaleza Europa, que dejan morir a los migrantes en Estados Unidos y Europa, que encierran y deportan. Free, free, free Palestine. Even one, two.
But these are the tactics. These are the tactics of the Israeli government. Again, violation of international law. That's something. But here's a flotilla going to aid people in need, those who are starving. Those who are you know sleeping out, being exposed day in and day out because they have no shelter. Most of these camps that prop up or go up, to give children shelter, something for them to sleep under, are attacked. Um, for Israel to be this way is something. It speaks volumes about who these people are and what they're really about. Um, I don't know. I don't get how the world is not up in arms and supporting, not just the flotillas that go in to bring in those necessities these people, require to continue to exist, but the fact that Israel continues to be able to thwart and violate, certain international laws, human rights. It's kind of confusing to me that the world, especially those powers in the world, would sit back and just watch this or allow it to continue to occur. Something's wrong. Something's wrong with the world. That is incredible that is allowed to happen. You have to ask yourself, okay, what's really going on in the world? or in a world where here it is 2026 and we see what's occurring. We see the wars, all the time. There are wars, taking place all over the world. And not only that, but we see the atrocities of governments against not just their own people, but people from other countries. We see sovereignty being violated, and disrespected, disregarded. We see those who have power wielding it with, just without restraint against those who are powerless. There's something wrong in the world, in that the world continues to allow these things to happen, and not just in the Middle East or in South America and in Africa, but just all over the world. We see these atrocities and this oppression, the death, murder, and destruction of people and property take place, and no one says anything. While at the same time, a lot of these countries that sit back and watch, they'll be the first to claim or proclaim that they are civilized, and that they have a great respect for human life and humanity. It would be no surprise when Israel finally falls. Most people, say that out loud, now. Israel has created an enemy amongst the world. Yeah, can you imagine the joy, the joy and the glee of Palestinians and Arabs when they finally rid their land of these usurpers, these imposters? It boggles the mind that the world, especially those in power, will continue to allow this to happen. And I'm not talking about the United States, because we already know their stance on this. We're not talking about Great Britain, because we already know their stance on this. They had a lot to do with these Ashkenazis even landing over there in Palestine and, occupying, colonizing that land. We know where that came from. That's been there. They've been there since 1917, and no time before that, so this is why it's allowed, because we think that there's nowhere else for these Ashkenazi Europeans, these Jewish people to go. And these countries that support and allow this behavior to continue to happen surely don't want them in their countries. This is why this exists. There's nowhere else for them to go. And this is why you hear their right, their right to exist. What about the Palestinians' right to exist? That should be first. They were there first. It's a problem. Anytime Israel, if even consider the Palestinians were willing to work out a two-state solution, that wasn't even good enough for those people. So yeah, this is long overdue. So hats off to Spain and any other European nation that would support not just curtailing Israel, but putting them in check wholly and totally. It's what's required. And we see conflict now starting to brew with Turkey and Israel. There'll be no peace over there, especially for the Israelis, as long as they're there in committing these atrocious acts, these acts of genocide. There'll never be any peace from there. And then, a lot of people tend to think that their time is limited anyway. A lot of them are realizing, coming to find out, that there aren't even Jews. They aren't even Jews. This is why the government of Israel won't allow blood tests, DNA testing, because it would tell the truth. But aside from that, the world has to stand up as one and call a foul, point out the violations of not just international law, but the violations of human rights, man, against these people. Put them on notice. That'd be the best thing for them, at least the best thing for the world. We tend to think that, they have taken on those who have done what they're doing to others. This is their mindset now. They are the new Nazis. That's what they are. That's what they are. So let us know. What are your thoughts on this matter? Is Spain doing the right thing? And all those other countries in the EU as well as NATO, are they doing the right thing? Is this the way to go? Is this how you handle what Israel is doing to those in the Middle East and those other international individuals, these sovereign people who come to assist the people in need? Is Spain acting justly and righteously? And is Israel, or does Israel have the right to continue to do what we, the world, is seeing it do to people? Put your thoughts in the comments. We appreciate them, and we'll answer each and every one. So until next time, take care of yourselves and one another.
You can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder a revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom.